I'm delighted to be joined now by Paul Scully, Minister for London, live now down in College Green. I'm glad the rain stopped, Paul. Nice to see you. What is going on inside that building behind you? Because it was a pretty awful week last week for Rishi Sunak and a pretty bad week for the Tory party in general. Will there be any chance of the taxes being cut? What do you see?
Well, look, we've got a difficult situation, economic situation that's ongoing. It's improving. The political situation is stabilising under Rishi as well. But there are loads and loads of challenges ahead. He's still going through his programme, the 5 pledges, halving inflation, reducing the debt, growing the economy, stopping the boats and reducing the backlog in the NHS. And that's all progressing along. Difficult things to do, but we'll see what happens in the autumn statement. I can't preempt that. But clearly, the by-elections were also difficult. You know, you saw people, Conservatives, staying at home. We've got to do what we can to motivate them over this these coming few months, this coming year, to make sure they come out, keep Keir Starmer and the people behind him, like Jeremy Corbyn and other Labour MPs, out of power, and the Conservatives in to continue that journey.
Do you think the problem's going to be, though, motivating them to get out and vote, as you say? Because, you know, Conservatives historically don't like to vote for other parties. They either vote Conservative or they don't. It's going to be a struggle, isn't it? Because you're going to have to ideally pinpoint precisely what people want. I mean, I can probably tell you what some of the things will be that they want. There's a move towards moving people out of these luxury hotels. The migrants crisis is going on. But if that doesn't really... I mean, if that all it does is move them into slightly cheaper hotels in other parts of town rather than in the country, that might actually backfire anyway.
Yeah, look, that's the case, but that's not what's happening. You know, the hotels are costing us something like £6 million a day. We've got to get rid of that situation to solve the problem a different way. We've seen crossings down 20% this year compared to last year. We've seen the movement of Albanians to this country down 90% since the deal that we struck with the Albanian government. So it is a really difficult problem to solve, stopping the boats, but we've got to do it. We are doing it, but it's going to take that little bit of time to work through. And that's what we've got. Before we can start demonstrating what we want to promise people for the next 5 years, we've actually got to promise, show that we can deliver on these 5 pledges first.
Yeah. But let's have a look at those 5 pledges, because we've got hospital waiting lists still not particularly down, still more or less going in the wrong direction. I'm not absolutely sure what's going on with the doctors' strikes. I think they're still going on. I think they'll probably have another 1 or 2 soon. Next time you have a conference, no doubt, they'll probably decide to go out on strike again. Stop the boats. I mean, pretty much you've admitted you haven't stopped the boats. Inflation's coming down, not really much to do with Rishi Sunak's policies, more to do with just overall kind of, you know, economic conditions. You know, the 5 pledges, he said he should be judged by the end of the year. So you've got a lot of making up to do between now and December.
Well, there's lots to happen, but honestly, you can't pick and choose what's happening, though, there, Mike, because the inflation figures, you know, they're always looking as though they're coming down, but we've seen the fluctuations over the last year, and part of that is because of the strikes themselves and the wage demand. So what the government has done is it's really pushed hard to make sure that we're paying people a fair wage, but we're doing it in a way that isn't inflationary in itself, isn't causing that extra demand in itself, so that we can keep the trajectory of inflation coming down. Difficult when it's not like kind of inflation that we had in the 80s, but which was through an overheating economy. It's inflation caused by a tight labour market and, of course, the war in Ukraine, which is fueling food prices and energy prices.
I mean, the other big story, of course, of the last 18 days, as we've just been told by some of those terrible stories that the families have just been telling at a press conference in London, people whose elderly mothers have been kidnapped by Hamas. You know, the war in the Middle East is clearly going to have an impact on everything over the next several weeks and months, and possibly even over the next year. One of the things I wanted to ask you as Minister for London, you know, we've had the Metropolitan Police Chief, Sir Mark Rowley, saying that, you know, jihad doesn't necessarily mean a holy war. You know, we've hired some specialists to tell you the difference between an ISIS flag and a flag of faith in Islam. We've got, you know, hundreds of thousands of people potentially marching around London over the next few weeks who want to have free Palestine. Jewish people saying that they're in fear for their actual existence in England. And you've got, even today, the front page of the Sun with Dame Maureen Lipton, saying that she was offered basically protection by ITV because of all the anti-Semitism. I mean, it's a massive problem for London, isn't it?
Oh, it absolutely is. To finish your first point with this context, clearly the global instability, including now the conflict in Israel and Gaza, really does fuel inflation. It fuels movement of people as well, back to the boat situation. But what we've seen in London is an incredibly complex situation, but a situation that needs to be policed incredibly robustly. You talked about that call for jihad. And, you know, we're not talking about a religious dissertation here. We are talking about Hizb ut-Tahrir, an organisation where many people, including people that were speaking yesterday, have supported the terrorist acts of Hamas. They've called for the destruction of Israel. I think we clearly know what jihad meant in that context. What I've been asking people to do in London, from both sides of the argument, is to, for goodness sake, be temperate with your words. Support the people in Palestine to be able to live a peaceful and equitable life. Support Israel's ability to self-determine their future, to be able to defend themselves. But don't go overboard using the words of terrorists because you don't really fully understand what is inevitably a complex situation. Otherwise, you're just inflaming further and further, more and more tension here on the streets of London.
But doesn't also the presence of all of those people marching in London increase tensions just by their very existence? I mean, the police have admitted, basically, that if they were doing it outside a synagogue, they wouldn't let them. But they can apparently do it down Piccadilly.
Well, look, I mean, I think the right to protest has been enshrined in UK law for a long, long time. So I think if people want to come out in the streets, that's up to them, as long as they're doing it with the police, clearly. It has to be consistent, though, because there was obviously a vigil in Golders Green in North London with the Jewish community wanting to come out to remember those people that have been kidnapped in Israel and to commemorate those awful attacks that we've seen some of the detail coming out over the last 24 hours that happened a couple of weeks ago. We saw the people in Trafalgar Square who held a vigil, were able to hold a vigil, actually penned behind barricades, purportedly to protect them. But can you imagine if you're a member of the Jewish community that's been barricaded in to be able to remember your loved ones when you see 100,000 people coming down the streets of Whitehall? It's very inconsistent, and I think we've got to keep the safety on the streets of London, so policing is very complicated and it's an operational matter for the police, but we've got to have that consistency.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely right, because they've said they're going to continue with these marches. They're going to continue having them every weekend. But you've got memorials coming up. You've got Armistice Day coming up. You've got, Poppy Day coming up. You've got the Cenotaph Sunday as well for Remembrance Sunday. I mean, the two things can't coexist, surely.
Well, you've got to work these things through. That's what I mean about the operational nature that the police have to lead on. But look, I say to people coming out on the streets, first of all, yes, make sure that you're campaigning for a just reason, but also use the words. It's a complicated situation. Don't come out because you're jumping on a bandwagon. Where were, people calling out the terrorist actions of Hamas and, killing children indiscriminately, literally by their own hand? Where have these people been for the last few years? It needs a consistency. It needs a degree of thought rather than just different groups, disparate groups coming in and agitating within people who, as I say, are coming out into the streets not really understanding the complexity of the situation in the Middle East.
No,
that
exactly.
then just goes to fuel that geopolitical situation in the Middle East, as well as inflaming tension on the streets of London.
Yeah, let me just take you back to Hizb ut-Tahrir, because you referred to them as terrorists. They've been banned in Bangladesh, in China, in Germany, in Russia, in Turkey, in Indonesia, and all other Arab countries apart from Lebanon, Yemen and the UAE. Why are they not a proscribed terrorist organisation in this country?
Well, I know Tony Blair was looking at this, David Cameron was looking at this, and, I think that's something we will always keep under review. It's not my...
That's a long time ago.
I can't give you the depth of understanding. Yeah, no, it is, but I can't give you the depth of understanding as to give you a good explanation of why that is not the case now. I think you need to speak to one of our security ministers, Home Office minister, to look at that. But it is something, clearly, we need to look at what people are saying, how people are inflaming tension, and then act accordingly.
Right. Well, they'll say, presumably, well, the police say what we said was OK, so what do you mean? What do you mean we have to be shut down? Similarly, an incredible story at the weekend in the Sunday Times revealing that one of Hamas's leaders has been living in Colindale, a part of North London, heavily populated by Jewish minority in Barnet, in the borough of Barnet, bought a council house, got a discount from the council. I mean, it's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, well, if you're a member of a terrorist organisation, clearly that needs to be investigated, and I'm sure that will be the case, that the security services will be looking at that.
Yeah, well, let's hope so.